Hi, I'm David Terrace, partner at the Rawson Law Firm. I'm here today to talk to you about the federal sentencing structure, which includes the Sentencing Code and the Federal Sentencing Guidelines, and why it is so important to hire an experienced federal criminal defense attorney to represent you in your matter. Federal sentencing is so important to talk about and so important for our clients because of the federal criminal system in general. The nature of the federal system is such that the statistics say that between 97 and 98% of cases resolve via a resolution. We are always looking to have your federal case won by a not guilty at trial with motions, but based on the reality of the system, we have to talk about sentencing. It's crucial. And it's usually one of the first questions that clients ask us when they come in to meet with me. They say, David, what are my guidelines on this case? What are my federal sentencing guidelines? So let's talk about why that's so important. In the federal system, there are no traditional plea negotiations like there are in a state case. In a state case, the defense and the prosecution can agree to a deal of maybe 3 years probation. That deal gets signed by our client, handed to the judge accepts it, and that's your sentence. It's something that was negotiated between the parties. That is not how it works in the federal system. In the federal system, there are plea deals, but the plea deal is just the very first step of resolving the process of resolving a federal case. Because as I've said, in federal, every single case that is not a not guilty or won by a motion goes to a sentencing hearing. At that sentencing hearing, the federal judge has the ultimate discretion regarding what your sentence may be. However, the judge's discretion is absolutely limited by the federal sentencing scheme, which consists of two different things. There is the United States Code, which involves the maximum penalties for a case and also lists the factors that the judge must consider when fashioning a sentence for a federal defendant who has pled guilty to a charge and is now before the judge for sentencing. 7 factors to be considered at a sentencing are as follows. 1, the nature and circumstances of the offense and history and characteristics of the defendant. The need for the sentence imposed to reflect the 4 primary purposes of sentencing. 4 primary purposes being retribution, deterrence, incapacitation, and rehabilitation. The kinds of sentences available. The sentencing range established through application of the sentencing guidelines and the types of sentences available under the guidelines. Any relevant policy statements promulgated by the Commission. The need to avoid unwarranted sentencing disparities among defendants with similar records who have been found guilty of similar conduct, and the need to provide restitution. These are the 7 factors a judge must consider. But let's talk about what happens in reality. Okay? In reality, the starting point and really the focal point of a federal sentencing hearing is the federal sentencing guidelines. Commonly, you'll see U.S.S.G, United States Sentencing Guidelines. That is not only the starting point, but under the sentencing code that was just discussed, it is one of the specific areas where a judge must look and must consider. Now, a judge does not have to follow. It is not mandatory that a judge in federal court follow the guidelines, but under a case known as United States versus Booker, that case, the Supreme Court said that the guidelines are advisory, not mandatory. Hiring an experienced federal criminal defense attorney who knows how these guidelines actually play out at a sentencing hearing is crucial because judges, prosecutors, and the whole federal system is far more based around these guidelines than just the term advisory or starting place, okay? There are ways that we're going to speak about in other videos about how to lower or what's called downward depart from the guidelines. It's possible that a judge could issue what's called an upward variance from the guidelines, where the judge goes higher than the guidelines. But the guidelines are the focal point of any federal sentencing. And given the number of cases, 97 to 98% of federal cases that end up resolving via resolution and end up in front of a judge for sentencing, it's crucial that you have an attorney who is intimately knowledgeable about the way the guidelines work, the different roles, the different adjustments that are incorporated in the guidelines, and what areas of the guidelines can be negotiated throughout different stages of the case. If you or one of your loved ones are the subject of a federal investigation, or God forbid are indicted on a federal crime, please contact our firm. We have the federal experience necessary in order to make sure that you and your loved one will get the services and the legal representation that you need to be in the best possible position to get a favorable outcome of your federal case.